Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Brian Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Brian are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Hello, I am Matt Seitz, Chief Marketing Officer here at JL Smith. Hopefully you tuned into our recent podcast with Jason featuring Carrie Kerskie, President of Kerskie Group, LLC. I had the pleasure of having a similar interview with Carrie where she recommended some tools in helping to protect your passwords and data. There is certainly some actionable insights that all of you can be taking advantage of right away. We wanted to share that advice with all of you here. We hope you enjoy. What password application would you recommend? Is there any one that's better than another, or are there several out there?
There are many of them out there. The one that I would kind of avoid right now is LastPass, only because they did have two major data breaches in the past couple of years. Now, I'm sure their security has improved significantly because of all of the negative press that they had. But the two things that I recommend looking for is encryption at rest and encryption in transit. So encryption at rest means when your passwords are stored on their server, if their server gets compromised, gets hacked, your data is not going to be exposed because it's encrypted. And the criminal would have to have the decryption key to be able to turn that back into usable data. Okay. I believe the problem with LastPass is they stored the decryption keys on the same servers. So it was really easy for the criminals to get a hold of it and decrypt everything. But, that would be something to look at. And then encryption in transit, because the big risk is that when you're retrieving or connecting to your password vault, that
Right.
back and forth in cyberspace, it's wide open. Anybody can intercept it. So at least if it's encrypted, what encryption does is that it scrambles the data. So if anyone does intercept it, it's useless. It's just gobbledygook. They can't do anything with it because they have to have that decryption key to put it back in the proper order so it's actually usable information. But I see in there somebody asked about 1Password. That's the one I use. I like that one. I've tried a bunch of them. I tried Dashlane and a bunch of the other ones. For me, I found Dashlane kind of clunky, where for me, 1Password was a little bit user, but other people prefer the other one. So what I recommend if you want to switch to one, don't go all in and put all your passwords in. Start with 1, 2, or 3 accounts that you use on a daily basis. That way you can test it out, get a feel for it, give it 30 days. Because when I first used it, I hated it. I was calling it every name in the book. I'm like, I don't want to do this. It's annoying. Now it's a part of my process and I don't even think about it. It's just part of what I do every day. So start small with, 1, 2, or 3 accounts. After 30 days, if you like that one, then move everything into it. Because if after a couple of days or after the 30 days, you're like, I don't really like this one, and you want to move to a different one, you don't want to have to move all your passwords again. So start small, but I do think they're good. A big reason why they're good is we get contacted all the time from people where the person who manages the family finances, usually it's one person in a household, they either got sick or they're on medication or they have dementia or they're in an accident or they passed away. And people are like, we can't get into the accounts. Can you get into these for us? No, we can't. So by using the password managers, you can appoint to someone, and I always forget the term that they use for it, but it's almost like a digital executor, if you will. But you can appoint someone or allow them to have access, or you can even share your vaults where if you need to share passwords. Like for me, the family, the Netflix. I was sick and tired of having to give the Netflix password out. So it's like, here's the vault for that. Go get it yourself. So I do think they're a good idea, but I have nothing against paper and pencil. If people want to use that, that's perfectly fine. If they're comfortable with it, just make sure to hide it. Don't leave it out on, and don't put it underneath your mouse pad or your keyboard. That's the first place I look.
Got it. No, thank you for the tip there of trying, 2, 3 at a time too, to see, what you like. It's a good idea. Two others that popped up. I don't know if you had feedback on either Aura and RoboForm. I don't know if you had any feedback on either of those.
Yeah, so Aura is like a new version of a LifeLock, if you will, where they all claim to offer identity theft protection. My response to that is most of the people who come to us that are victims, they have those services, but they end up hiring us to do what those services said they were going to do, but they really don't. And I can say that with confidence because that's what they tell us. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of those. And with those services, if you put a credit freeze in place, you don't need credit monitoring, because if it's frozen, there can't be any new, well, criminals can still apply for credit applications using your identity, but the accounts will never be open with a credit freeze. So it's your best defense against new account fraud. And these services primarily only monitor credit-related transactions. They can't monitor for unemployment identity theft, criminal identity theft, all the other types of identity theft out there. So don't people buy these things and they think, oh, I don't have to worry about it, I'm protected. That's not the case. So, take that for what you will. And they also have the passwords, and they also have VPN. Now, everybody has different opinions on VPN. To me, I think for everyday user at their house, it's overkill. It's ridiculous. You don't need it. All it's going to do is slow down, what you're doing. And people think, oh, well, it protects everything you're doing online. No, it doesn't. All it does is hide your IP address, because instead of going off of your local server, you're going off someone else's. And now we're finding a lot of these free VPN services, they're scammers. They're creating it so you're doing everything on their servers. So I'm not a big fan of the VPNs. If you travel a lot for business and you need it because, location-wise, or if you're going to be, hotels, coffee shops, airports, VPNs are kind of good because it does help a little bit, but it's not the end-all be-all like people make it out to be. So just, if you're at home using a VPN and you have your own Wi-Fi network, it's overkill, I think. That's my opinion. But there are a lot of programs out there that you can use for password managers. I do want to say real quick, though, a lot of times people will use Keychain through Apple, which I think is a great program, and that's not storing it in the web browser because it's in a separate program. But the only problem I have with it is last year we saw a huge increase in people taking over Apple ID accounts because most people had a bad password. They created them 10 years ago and they forgot all about them. If your Apple ID account gets compromised, there's no back door. Apple can't reset it for you. You have lost it and everything in it, which includes your passwords and keychain. So I don't like to keep all my eggs in one basket. I like to kind of have things separate. It's more work for me, but then it's more work for criminals to get into everything. So that's just kind of my take on that.
Thank you for a lot of this advice. And, one question we had there was actually similar to one we discussed earlier. So I'll kind of jump ahead. Some of the common tools to fight against fraud are encryption and the multi-factor authentication. Can you explain how these tools can help?
Yeah, so encryption, kind of like I mentioned earlier, what it does, it scrambles the data. So if somebody were to get into it, it would just be nonsense. It would just be random characters and it wouldn't be useful information. You have to have the decryption key, which could be a password as a decryption key, to put it back in proper order so it's usable information. So that's why encryption is good. As far as with multi-factor authentication, absolutely. Every account you have online, turn it on. Think of it this way. If it takes you one step to log into your account, that's one step the criminal is going to have to overcome. If it takes you 2 steps, that's 2 steps they're going to overcome. So the more barriers or hurdles that you have to do to get into your account, that's how many they have to overcome. So instead of being like, oh, I hate this thing, it's annoying, it takes more time, well, there's a reason for that, because you can't prevent criminals from trying to come after you. But if you're a difficult target, they're going to move on to somebody else. They work off of volume and numbers, just like any other business. And they're not going to devote all their time to one person who has all these hurdles in place. They're going to go off to somebody who's wide open. So make yourself a difficult target. Use these tools. With the multi-factor authentication, it's basically something you know, something you have, something you are, and then so on. So that's why you have username and password. That's something you know. When they send you a code, either by a text or an email, that's because you have access to that email or that phone. And now they're progressing over to pass keys, and you have to have an authenticator app to be able to do that. If you're not familiar with passkeys, start learning about them, because pretty soon all online accounts are only going to use that as an option, and you don't want to learn it when you have to have it. You want to make sure you're familiar with it before you have to start using it, because if you lose access to that authenticator, you could be locked out of some of your accounts. So start learning about that now.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.